All
Oh,
righty, we're
yeah,
recording.
right. Here we are. Well, here we are again. And today we're going to be talking about a new book called Trodden. And I got word of this through Facebook. It came across my Facebook page, and the name and the image just intrigued me. I was dying to talk with this author, Ryan Opaz, and mostly because I had this love of Portugal. I had been there in the 80s. My parents moved there for 15 years later, and that gave me the opportunity and the open door to take travelers on my Paint Portugal trip. And so we would go paint Portugal and visit with mom and dad and see a little bit of Portugal. At the same time, my brother was developing his winemaking skills. And so now he is quite the winemaker. And he's been on the show earlier and, doing award-winning wines, loves Portugal, was just there. And so I thought, oh my goodness, Portugal and wine. Ryan and I are going to have plenty to talk about. So this book is a joint venture between Simon Woolf, who is a New York Times bestseller author, and Ryan Opaz, who is the CEO of CataVino. It's a travel company in Portugal, very successful, by the way. And he is with me here today. The book will be on the shelves in September, fingers crossed. And so I want to welcome Ryan to the show.
Thank you very much, Annie. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Very happy to be here.
Good, good. Well, tell us about this book, Trodden. I mean, do you have a picture of do you have the book in front of you? I hate to put you on the spot like that, but okay.
I wish I did. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not written yet.
I'm sorry, but that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Exactly.
So why don't you describe the cover and tell us a little bit about the book and how you got inspired?
Well, I'll find a picture of the cover I can hold up the screen, but the book is what is it? It's my chance to finally talk about not just the wines I love, but the country I love. Me and Simon, the author you mentioned, we did a book together a couple of years ago called Amber Revolution, which was about an obscure style of wine called orange wine. And when we did that book, it did win a lot of awards and did well. And I did all the photos, he did the writing. And during that, we spent a lot of nights drinking bottles of wine around dinner tables all over the world as we talked about.
You have to do the research, right?
Exactly. Very difficult research. So we while we were writing a book about orange wine, which was largely Georgia, Slovenia, some of these other countries, Italy, we did drink a lot of Portuguese wine too. And Simon had been coming to Portugal a lot as my friend. And I don't remember the exact night it was, but I'm sure there was a lot of bottles involved when we looked at each other and said, maybe our next book's about Portugal. And for me, I'm not much of I've written quite a bit in my day, but I never enjoyed the writing process as much. But I do love the research. I do like the storytelling part of it. And so having Simon, who's an excellent writer, take and work with me where we can co-write the book, I'll still do the photos, was, a chance of a lifetime and an opportunity really to write a book about a country and its wines that doesn't really have any good books about it. There's a few textbooks, but there's nothing that makes you fall in love really. And I felt like Portuguese wine or wine in Portugal, I mean, it's so ingrained in the culture that it's actually at a different tax rate than other alcohol. It's treated like food. And so it's a part of the culture that's important to tell even the story of Portugal. And for that reason, this opportunity came along and we both said we got to do it. And collecting the stories has been a lot of fun. It's taken us 4 years basically. And right now we have these next couple months, we have to have the whole book written and to the publisher by the middle of May, I think.
Ooh, that's going to be...
we're up against the wall right now, but that's usually when the best stuff shows up.
Yeah. The cover is very vivid and rich. It's basically feet in the grapes being crushed, and so you have um,
Where's
this
my feet?
dark. Oh, there it is. Yes. For those of you who are on the video version of it, yes, you've got that that flesh against those grapes, and it's stunning to just look at. And I
Yeah,
just took
there's
my
the full
just,
cover. There's the full cover.
oh yeah, foot trodden. You'll get
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Hey. Um, so so that is really the story. It's about humans and the grape making experience, and the stories and the people and the history. And I can't wait to get it. Um, so let's bring people up to speed on Portugal.
Mhm.
It is a country that people kind of always curious about, but it's off their radar. And sometimes I'll say, well, what about Portugal? And they're like, oh, yeah, I've been thinking about that. I want to do that. So it's it's west of Spain. A little piece of Spain touches in the north, but it's a long rectangle with the lion's share of the coast being on the Atlantic, and then it turns the corner down along the south that's all part of the Iberian Peninsula. Still the Mediterranean down there in the Algarve, and then you've got all of Spain on the east coast, or not east coast, east border of
Yep.
of Portugal, and it's broken into regions. Am I about right on that?
Yeah, the first part you said was absolutely right. Most people think they've heard of Portugal, but I'm surprised by how many people have flown to Portugal and not known where they were flying until they got here.
Oh yeah, we're going to touch down in Lisbon.
Well, I mean, I once had a friend come visit me in Porto, and she booked a flight, and then she calls me from Lisbon and says, Ryan, I'm at the airport. What's your address so I could tell the taxi driver? I said, you're in where? She goes, Lisbon. I thought it was right next to Porto. I was like, well, it's a little bit further. So I think Portugal's misunderstood for a lot of reasons. One, it's the same basic size as Lake Superior in Minnesota, where I'm originally from. And so to have a lake in the States the same size as this country is quite shocking. But beyond that, from top to bottom, it is incredibly diverse. The mountains, the hills, the valleys, the canyons. It has a huge amount of diversity in a very small package. And combine that with the rustic Atlantic facing beaches, and then you have the southern beach, which butts up against the Mediterranean. You have almost anything you could want. The only thing we don't get a lot of, and granted, sometimes we do up in the mountains, is snow. But basically, almost any other temperature or climate, you can find someplace in Portugal, and that's reflected, as you know, just as well as anybody, in the food, the wine, and the people. Even in this small space, there's a lot of diversity if you just go a few miles down the road.
Interesting. Yeah. So we've got the north, we've got the central part, and we've got the southern part. What are your I don't even want to say favorites, because I know that you love the country and it's really hard to describe that. But what would you describe the three regions then? Why don't we work it that way?
If you asked a Portuguese person to describe the three regions, they would probably roll their eyes, because they would want to discuss the 450 some regions they see.
Oh.
I mean, there's something that happens in Europe a lot. In Europe, when you ask somebody where they're from, if you always tell them where you were born. And I mean, Porto is a district, but it's also a city, and Matosinhos is right next to it. And if you're literally born across the street to Matosinhos, and I was to say, oh, you're from Porto, they'll look at you cross-eyed like, no, I'm not. I'm from Matosinhos. What are you talking about? So, to answer your question a little bit, I'd say maybe there's 4 mainland regions, and then you have the islands. So you have the very far north, which is kind of the Minho, which is very green. It's known as Vino Verde region, which means the green wine, which has nothing to do with the color of the wine. It just has to do with the fact it gets so much rain that everything is green, beautiful granite terraces everywhere, lovely rivers coming down from the Jadesh Mountains, and it's just lush. And that all flows out to the Atlantic. And then you have kind of Porto, the interior, which is Trás-os-Montes, which is beyond the mountains, Trás-os-Montes. And that's kind of not Porto, but I guess Porto is the start of it because of the Douro River. And that's kind of the mountains that divide the wine region of the Douro from where we are right now. Trás-os-Montes butts up against Spain and is very remote. There's not much there at all. A lot of small little villages, very hard life. You have the Douro wine region, of course, which is gorgeous, but it still is one of the poorest regions in Portugal. And that's kind of the north. So if you take those 2 regions, which are pretty different, that would be the first region you said, the north. In the middle-ish region, you have the wine regions of Baixada and Dão, but that's where the famous flat top mountain of Serra da Estrela is. And Serra da Estrela is where they have the famous sheep's cheese. That's actually, it's curdled with milk thistle and not animal rennet, which most cheeses are. So they use the actual thistles that they find in the mountains to curdle the cheese. And you get this little spicy flavor from that. And then you have this just gorgeous, lush blocks of creamy cheese.
I had totally forgotten about that. But I mean, now I remember it well. It's like, oh yeah, I love that.
It's good. It's very good.
And you can't get it anywhere else.
It's hard to get. There's some places now in the States that carry it, but not very many.
Okay.
And it's better to eat it, in situ here, because you get it nice and creamy, and it kind of drizzle it on your crackers. It's delicious. Moving south, kind of the next regions, again, to generalize, you have the Alentejo and the Tejo and Lisboa. And whereas Lisboa and the Tejo butt up against the Atlantic and are quite influenced by the Atlantic with cool breezes. And a little bit, it reminds me a little bit of Southern California in some ways, like Sonoma, Napa, somewhere in there. Nice rolling green hills, nice temperate temperatures, and beautiful. And then it comes up to the Tejo River, the Tagus River, which beyond Alentejo, beyond the Tejo, you have this incredible wine region that has incredible history going back to Roman times, with making wine in amphora, large amphora called Talia, which we tell the story about in the book. And that region is crazy because in the summer you can get up to 45 degrees Celsius, which is 110, 120 degrees. And I mean, I've literally been there in the summer. I was giving a class on, I don't know, something about social media. And I remember in class, we're in a room with air conditioning, and we came out and we had to walk across the street to the restaurant. And people were literally walking in the shade of like a light pole, just so they wouldn't, like, stay in the, because I mean, the sun is so intense and brutal in the summer. And it's also where the famous cork forests are, which produce the corks for our wines, and the pigs, the black-footed pigs that Spain uses for their famous pata negra hams. Many of them, much to the Spanish chagrin, actually come from the Portuguese plain. So they feed off the acorns.
That cork. Can you just stop it?
We can always
off. I mean, it is absolutely off.
Don't worry about it. This is the best part. You can always edit.
I'm gonna kill these people and my phone. I mean, it's okay. Okay. So about the cork.
Yep.
So the interesting thing about the cork and is the trees look very much like olive trees, if I remember correctly. I mean, no?
No, they're big, 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 tall oak trees.
Well, okay, let's,
No, but what you
I
may
know
think,
nothing.
what you may see, no, no, no. But so just to clarify, one thing I think that you're thinking is down there, you'll have olive trees mixed in with the cork oaks often. And so while some of the cork oaks are a little bit smaller, I've made the same mistake many times, many
Okay,
times.
they have that silvery leaf. I mean, they're I don't know. It seemed to me that the way they grew, but I need to come to Portugal and see it again.
We need to give you a tour, and you can go and you can see the cork trees. And when you get into a cork tree forest, there's always going to be olive trees there too. That's, I mean, olive trees are from top to bottom in Portugal, as you know.
Yeah.
But the cork oak, when you get up next to it, you see the bark, and it just feels like it's like spongy looking, and it's totally strange to look at. And those cork trees are protected by the government. It's illegal to cut one down. And you can only cut it down with a very, very large amount of bureaucracy, because they're natural country's patrimony, basically. And they have a lot of species of animals that depend on them, including the black-footed pig. So I totally get where you could mess that up, because when you go down there, you either basically see cork trees or olive trees,
Mm-hmm.
and they're mixed together quite often. And the pigs love them both.
Well, what I think for our listeners is that it's part of it's a piece of Portugal that people don't even think about. We open our bottles of wine all the time with cork, and that cork comes from Portugal, and to see that, and to see those red barks after they've peeled that off, and that they only come back every they can cut it every two, and they're numbered, so they know,
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years.
Yeah,
you can't even
get a you can't even get a cork for a wine bottle in the first 30 years. So you plant a tree. If you're a farmer, you plant a cork oak. The first 30 years, you have to harvest your tree at least 3 times. Out of those 3 harvests, you may get the last one, but definitely the first 2 and possibly the third have to go into shredded particulate, which has no real value. In the 3rd harvest or 4th harvest, you finally get your first corks.
Wow.
Then you can harvest it for up to, I think, 6 to 8 more times, basically. And so it's not a huge return on your investment.
Yeah.
The way you make your money is the acorns the cork oak produce actually feeds those pigs, and those pigs have some nice value. So you need this circular ecosystem down there, and everything kind of feeds off everything else down there.
Oh, it's so fun. So let's circle back to the book.
Yep.
Tell us what's in this book. Give us an example. Tell me a story. Paint me a picture.
All right. Well, we have the book's broken up into chapters that are related to the regions, because each region, we believe, highlights maybe a different element of Portugal. And the real story behind the name Trodden is Portugal's a country that's been poor for a long time. It used to be one of the biggest empires in the world. It used to be very rich back then. But in recent decades, it's been poor. It's had a dictatorship it lived through, quite a few other dramatic events. And this whole time, the Portuguese wine has been made in almost the same way it always has been made. Sure, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of modernization and modern winemaking techniques came in. But the irony is, as much as when modernity hit in winemaking, the people took pride in that and started shouting about that, but they never stopped doing what they did before, which is treading grapes by foot, by making wine in clay pots, growing vines in the sands on the beach in Coauthor. A lot of these things, which if you want to make modern wine just seems stupid, they kept doing out of lack of opportunity at times, and a little bit of cultural pride, but they never spoke about it. It was never something you really talked about. You might talk about the Douro treading grapes because there's some prestige there, but a poor farmer who couldn't afford a press might not mention it because he was embarrassed that he had to tread his grapes. Fast forward to today, and we're all looking to get back to the land. We're all looking for these touches with the past. We're looking to take care of the planet in a better way after quite a few years of beating it up pretty bad. And me and Simon fell in love with it. I'll tell you the one story that kind of just makes me, super excited in so many different ways is I've been coming here since 2003 and living here for over 8-9 years. And I've written about Portuguese wine top to bottom. And one day we're in the Alentejo and we're at a tasting, and somebody casually mentions that behind every door in the Alentejo, there's an amphora, a small pot, and they make wine in it. And my friend Simon, of course, says later, he's like, well, that was kind of silly. They don't have a pot behind every door in the Alentejo. And I said, I kind of feel like they might. I'm not sure if it's every door, but I get the feeling they weren't making that up. And so a year later, we're at this tasting and we start asking people about it. And we meet this one guy and he's like, well, yeah, of course there is. So we're like, what do you mean?
Show me.
And so we go to this village and we literally meet this guy for morning coffee at the local cafe. And we're talking and the cafe owner asks why we're there. And we tell him and he goes, oh, you want to see my amphora? And we walk across the street and behind his car in the garage is an amphora. And we walk down the street and, we open a door and there's 3 of them in the back, all with wine, all dripping wine out the bottom where they have a gasket for collecting the wine. And we're like freaking out. And then we go into this room and this winery called 21 Talhas, which features heavily in the book. They have all of these amphoras they've restored. And we start finding out that this tradition has been going on unbroken for probably centuries. But the interesting thing about it, which really struck home, was that, we turned to him and we started, you go up, literally they have a batok, which is a thing they put in the bottom, what do you call it? A tornera, a faucet.
Like a faucet, yeah.
Yeah, made of wood that they put into the base. The wine drips out because it's filtering through the bottom stems, cleaning it, and it's dripping out into a little bowl. And they give you a glass like this big. In fact, I thought I had one here, but a small little glass, and you go up and you taste it and drink some wine. And he's like, what do you think? And we're like, it's really good. It's like incredible. There's a lot to how they make the wine that I won't get into now because it's too long. But at that point, he says, oh, you want to go taste some more? And we said, sure. Where? And he says, oh, we'll just go down the street. Walk down the street a block or two. And there's another door open and some guys sitting around a table and they have 7 Talhas all dripping wine. And we're like, what's going on? And like, oh, well, that house and that place and that place. And next thing you know, every place we went, we're like, what do we owe these people for it? And he's like, oh, nobody pays. I mean, these are friends. The friends come and they drink from each other's Talhas and they tell stories and you might bring a little sausage with you when you go visit to put on their fire, but you drink from it. And one of the Talhas I have a photo of, I think it was 1678 was the date it was made. It was still inscribed in the side of it. And it wasn't a museum piece. It had wine in it from that vintage that they were
using it, right?
Yeah. So at that point, I looked at Simon and Simon looked at me. He's like, are you as emotional about this as I am? And I'm like, I thought I understood Portuguese wine. This is something I've never seen before. And the community and camaraderie was just beautiful. I mean, just gorgeous. And the wines were delicious. And there's a lot of other stuff that comes with this story that, you can read in the book, but I don't want to get too complex. But it was a moment when I realized, even having been here this long, I still have a lot to discover. And even some of the stories I think I know, I still need to peel back a few more layers to really get to the core of them.
Well, I love that because it's, it's behind the door. It feels secretive, but it's not. It's just, but it does have a little bit of mystique to it. And you must have been feeling a little bit of that,
Well, to that point, here's the weird thing about Portugal. And I say this, I just got my notice that my citizenship is being approved. So I'll be a dual citizen here. So now I can say it as a Portuguese person, but I will also say it as a very good friend of many Portuguese people. The Portuguese are not great promoters and they do not shout about what they have. a typical saying when you meet somebody, oh, I like your wine. Ah, thanks, it's good. I mean, it's not Spanish wine, it's not French wine, but it's okay. There's always been this underspoken, like, yeah, but it's okay. And
Is it
that's
humility though?
it's humility. It's also a bit of not fully thinking that they're on the same stage as others.
Yeah.
And that's changing. And I think there's a new generation. But if we started digging into it to try to answer this question, and if you take almost any aspect of Portuguese history, so much of it is soft-spoken. If you talk one-to-one with somebody and you bring this up direct, you may get into a bit of a discussion. But if you sit back and you watch how things go, people aren't shouting from the rooftops about it. And I guess that's something rare nowadays.
Do you think that this book is going to change that? Because I'm wondering if you're, pardon the pun, the foot trodden, if you're stepping on their, not heartstring, you're stepping on their, it's not the tradition either. It's like, are you overstepping your boundary if you're shouting? Because that's what this book is going to do. It's going to be a little bit of a shout.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're telling a narrative. It's definitely more of a novel than a textbook. And no, I don't, because none of this stuff was secretive. It wasn't like anybody was hiding anything. Just nobody thought anybody cared.
Okay.
Like, well, yeah. Why would you care about our Talia wine when you can buy an expensive wine made in a wood barrel? Yeah. And when you taste the Talia wine, you're like, well, because it tastes better. Yeah. Right. So there's been this for a long time, kind of like, even Vino Verde. Vino Verde's known for these fizzy light wines for summer, but the part that most people don't understand is Vino Verde has great acidity. And if you treat the wine special, you can make wines that'll last decades. And in fact, I've had Vino Verde going back 30 years that was beautiful. I mean, unbelievably beautiful. And yet Vino Verde promotes itself as this fun, fuzzy summer fizzer. And, I tell this to some of my guests when they come here. I'm like, look, Vino Verde is one of the top white wine Grand Cru vineyards in Portugal, or regions. I don't say that lightly. I do believe it, but trying to find the wines to prove it is very hard because there isn't a lot of confidence in showing them off. That's changing, but now I like to see that change. But there's so many stories, and the whole book is kind of finding fun little snippets of Portuguese life that usually revolve around sitting with a bottle of wine in front of you, and with people we've met who we've gotten to know, and people we've had to get to know just for the book, and then tying that up in this complex history of coming out of a dictatorship, almost swinging to full-blown communism, coming back to a beautiful mid-range that balanced a lot of stuff. So you have this gigantic roller coaster on the back of the most peaceful revolution ever to occur in the history of the world. There was literally, I think, one death, maybe two deaths during the revolution, and it was an accident.
Well, we had more than that on the Capitol storming.
Exactly. A whole country's government leaves dictatorship, and there was literally almost zero gunshots.
The thing about Portugal is, and I'm so intrigued by this, is I'm sitting here looking at you and the wine bottles and the flag. I'm inspired to have a Portuguese night at my house and talk about that. We've done it before with different countries, but I haven't done Portugal, and I haven't done anything in a very long time. I mean, and what fun it would be to, so you'll have to send me a list of wines you must have for that. And of course, if I can get any of those sardines and any of that black sausage or pig.
Exactly. Well, fortunately for you, that's starting to change. I'm working with a couple different importers who are trying to change that. America never really fell in love with Portuguese wine like it did Italian wine. And one of the reasons that a lot of people point to is, every corner on Main Street America has a pizza joint. How many corners in America have a churrasquera, chicken piri piri?
Yeah.
There's nobody.
Yeah.
And so everybody had a Chianti bottle on their table, whether they wanted it or not, when they were having their pizza. But nobody knew anything about what Portugal was.
We knew nothing about it, but we also, there was a time, and I can tell you the year, it was 1968, 9, when Madeira was the rosé. Am I saying it right?
Mateus.
Mateus, yes, Mateus. And shape of the bottle, it was a rosé. I think it was a rosé. And it was so shishi. And those of us who were just learning how to drink, something besides, the other stuff, that was like, you knew that you had a big date night if there was a bottle of that wine.
And the funny thing is, though, I will ask guests will see that bottle on our trip. Like, we're on a bus or we go to a market and they'll see a bottle of Mateus on the shelf and they go, "Oh, I remember that from college. Where's that from?" I said, "Well, that's Portuguese." "No way. I had that back in college." I'm like, "No, that's a Portuguese wine. It's always been a Portuguese wine." So many people, to your point, in the beginning of this whole conversation, a lot of people don't even realize it's a Portuguese wine.
No. And I see a lot of things like some beautiful pottery. I'll flip it over and it's from Portugal, or so there's so many reasons to come to Portugal. You've got the wine, we've got the country, we've got the beautiful pousadas and lovely inns that we see all over the country. We have the pottery, and the dramatic landscapes, and the food, of course, and the history. I can't wait. I'm so excited to come back.
We're excited to have you back.
Tell me again, we think September, the book will be out.
So the book, for the people who backed it on Kickstarter, they'll probably, if everything goes according to plan with COVID, etc., they should have it sometime in September, and then on the shelves in Amazon, hopefully by the 20th or so of October.
Okay,
that's the goal.
So we're going to be pushing that. We're going to talk to you again in October. And so when it comes out, and we'll get people buying that book, and I will definitely have it because I was a Kickstarter. And so we'll definitely get that and have a party going, and see you in a few months.
Sounds great to me. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Annie. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Let me